The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in Courtroom 4B of the Cook County Family Court, casting harsh shadows across the polished wooden benches. 3-year-old Maya Chun sat perfectly still in a chair that seemed to swallow her tiny frame, her legs dangling several inches above the floor. Her dark eyes, once bright with the curiosity that defines childhood, now stared straight ahead with the hollow emptiness of someone who had seen too much, too young. Maya clutched a tattered purple elephant to her chest, its once vibrant fabric, now faded from countless nights of desperate holding. The stuffed animal's left ear hung by a single thread, and its button eyes had lost their shine, much like Maya herself. 6 months had passed since that horrific October night when her world shattered into 1,000 silent pieces. And in all that time, not a single word had escaped her lips. Dr. Amanda Foster, a child psychologist with 20 years of experience, treating traumatized children, sat beside Maya's chair, her usually confident demeanor showing cracks of concern. She had tried everything in her considerable arsenal: play therapy, art therapy, music therapy, even experimental treatment methods that pushed the boundaries of traditional child psychology. Nothing had worked. Maya remained locked in a prison of silence, her voice stolen by whatever terror she had witnessed that night. "Your Honor," Dr. Foster whispered urgently to Judge Patricia Harrison during a brief recess, "I need you to understand the gravity of Maya's condition. This isn't typical childhood shyness or even standard selective mutism. This child has experienced something so traumatic that her brain has completely shut down her ability to communicate verbally. She's not choosing to be silent, she literally cannot speak." Judge Harrison, a stern woman in her 50s who had presided over countless custody battles, felt her heart constrict as she looked at the motionless child. In her 2 decades on the bench, she had seen children cope with divorce, abuse, neglect, and abandonment, but Maya's complete withdrawal was unlike anything in her experience. The judge's own granddaughter was Maya's age, and the comparison made this case particularly haunting. The custody battle raging around Maya was as bitter as it was complex. Her Aunt Sarah Shun Martinez, a dedicated 3rd-grade teacher with kind eyes and calloused hands from her second job cleaning offices, fought desperately for guardianship. Sarah had been Maya's primary caregiver since the tragedy, sleeping on a mattress beside Maya's bed every night, patiently offering meals that often went untouched, and singing lullabies to a child who showed no response. "She knows me," Sarah had testified earlier, her voice breaking with emotion. Before everything happened, Maya used to run to me when I came to visit. She called me Auntie Sarah, and we would bake cookies together. She may not speak now, but I see recognition in her eyes. I see trust. She needs stability, not more upheaval." On the other side of the courtroom sat Richard and Patricia Chun, Maya's paternal grandparents, their expensive suits and cold demeanor a stark contrast to Sarah's humble appearance. They had hired Maxwell and Associates, one of Chicago's most ruthless family law firms, to argue that Sarah's modest teacher's salary, supplemented by her cleaning jobs, made her unfit to provide for Maya's complex needs. "Your Honor, attorney," Maxwell had argued with practiced precision, "my clients can provide Maya with the finest medical care, private schooling, and therapeutic interventions that money can buy. They have a mansion in Lincoln Park with a dedicated playroom, access to the city's best child psychiatrists, and the financial resources to ensure Maya's complete recovery. Ms. Chun Martinez, while well-meaning, simply cannot compete with these advantages." But what the lawyer's arguments and financial statements couldn't capture was the devastating truth sitting in that oversized chair. Maya had become a ghost of herself, existing in a twilight world where nightmares and reality blurred together. She ate mechanically when food was placed before her, slept fitfully when exhaustion overtook her, and moved through each day like a shadow of the vibrant child she once was. The courtroom itself seemed to absorb Maya's pain. Veteran bailiffs found themselves looking away from her vacant stare. Court reporters, accustomed to documenting human drama without emotional involvement, struggled to maintain their professional detachment. Even the most hardened attorneys present felt an uncomfortable knot in their stomachs when their eyes fell upon the silent child. Dr. Foster had documented Maya's condition meticulously. Before the trauma, Maya had been developing, normally even ahead of schedule in some areas. She had spoken in complete sentences, loved books, and delighted in simple games of peekaboo. She had been potty trained, could count to 20, and knew the alphabet song. Now, she had regressed to a pre-verbal state requiring assistance. With basic functions and showing no interest in toys, books, or activities that once brought her joy. The tragedy that had stolen Maya's voice remained largely shrouded in mystery. Police reports indicated that Maya had been present during a violent home invasion that resulted in her mother's death, but the details remained unclear. Adult witnesses provided conflicting accounts, and physical evidence raised more questions than answers. Maya was believed to be the only person who could provide crucial testimony about what really happened that night, but her silence had created an impenetrable wall around the truth. As the afternoon wore on, the weight of Maya's silence pressed down on everyone in the courtroom. Her purple elephant seemed to be her only connection to the world, the single constant in her shattered reality. She held it with the desperation of someone clinging to the last piece of the sinking ship, her small fingers gripping its worn fabric as if it contained the power to protect her from further harm. The custody hearing was more than a legal proceeding. It was a battle for the soul of a broken child, fought by adults who could only guess at the depths of her trauma. And as the clock ticked toward evening, Maya remained exactly as she had been for 6 long months, utterly, devastatingly silent, trapped in a world where words had become extinct and hope seemed as faded as her beloved purple elephant. But unbeknownst to everyone in that solemn courtroom, hope was about to arrive on 4 legs, carrying with it the power to unlock the prison that held Maya's voice captive. The heavy oak doors of Courtroom 4B creaked open with a sound that cut through the tense atmosphere like a blade through silk. Every head in the room turned toward the entrance, expecting perhaps another late attorney or court clerk. Instead, what they saw defied all expectations and seemed to shift the very energy of the spaced out officer Jake Morrison, stepped through the doorway with the confident stride of a man who had spent 15 years in law enforcement. But it wasn't his presence that commanded attention. Beside him, moving with fluid grace and unmistakable intelligence, padded Rex, a magnificent German shepherd whose coat gleamed like burnished gold under the harsh courtroom lights. Rex wasn't just large. He was imposing in the way that only truly exceptional animals can be, standing nearly 3 feet at the shoulder with alert ears and eyes that seemed to take in every detail of his surroundings. Judge Harrison had spent 3 sleepless nights agonizing over her decision to allow a therapy dog into her courtroom. In her 20 years on the bench, she had never approved such an unconventional request, but Maya's case had pushed her beyond the boundaries of traditional judicial protocol. Dr. Foster's final plea had been desperate. "Your Honor, we've exhausted every conventional treatment. Rex isn't just any therapy dog. He's specifically trained for courthouse interventions with traumatized children. His success rate is unprecedented." Rex wore a distinctive blue vest emblazoned with "Courthouse Therapy" K9 in bold white letters, but it was his bearing that truly set him apart. This wasn't a pet or even an ordinary service animal. Rex had undergone 2 years of intensive training at the Midwest Canine Therapy Institute, where he had learned to read human emotions with uncanny accuracy, remain calm in high-stress environments, and provide comfort without being intrusive. His trainer had called him extraordinary, a bondary. dog who seemed to understand human pain on an almost supernatural level. As Officer Morrison guided Rex down the center aisle, the courtroom's atmosphere began to transform. Hardened bailiffs who had seen everything from violent outbursts to heart-wrenching testimonies found themselves straightening in their chairs, their usual stern expressions softening slightly. The court stenographer, a woman who prided herself on maintaining professional detachment, actually paused her typing to watch the majestic animal approach. Attorney Maxwell, mid-sentence in his argument about financial advantages, found his words trailing off as Rex's presence seemed to dwarf the importance of trust funds and private schools. Even Richard and Patricia Chun, Maya's wealthy grandparents who had maintained stony expressions throughout the hearing, leaned forward with obvious curiosity. But it was Sarah Chun Martinez's reaction that revealed the true magnitude of this moment. The exhausted teacher, who had spent months watching her beloved niece retreat further into silence, felt something she hadn't experienced since that terrible October night. Hope. Her hands trembled as she gripped the armrest of her chair, tears gathering in her eyes as she whispered a prayer she had repeated countless times. Please, let something reach her. Rex moved with purpose, his training evident in every step. He had been briefed about Maya's case during the drive to the courthouse, though his preparation went far beyond verbal instruction. Officer Morrison had shown Rex photographs of Maya, allowed him to smell clothing items that carried her scent, and described her condition in the simple, direct language that Rex had been trained to understand. The dog knew he was here for the small, silent human, and his focus was absolute. Dr. Foster watched with professional fascination, tinged with desperate hope. She had studied Rex's file extensively, his work with children who had survived natural disasters, his success with young witnesses in abuse cases, his remarkable ability to sense when a child was ready to speak. Rex's previous cases read like miracles. A 7-year-old who hadn't spoken after witnessing a car accident suddenly began talking during Rex's 3rd visit. A 5-year-old abuse victim who trusted Rex enough to reveal crucial details that led to her abuser's conviction. The dog's reputation extended far beyond Chicago. Law enforcement agencies across the Midwest had begun requesting Rex for their most challenging cases involving child witnesses. He had been featured in professional journals, studied by animal behaviorists, and even consulted on by researchers investigating the bond between humans and therapy animals. But none of his previous successes could guarantee he would reach Maya, whose silence had proven impenetrable to every other intervention. As Rex drew closer to where Maya sat, Officer Morrison felt the familiar tightening in his chest that always preceded their most important cases. He had been Rex's handler since the dog's certification, and their partnership had become legendary within law enforcement circles. Morrison had learned to trust Rex's instincts completely, even when they defied conventional wisdom or protocol. Courtroom fell into a hushed silence as Rex approached Maya's chair. This wasn't the forced quiet of legal proceedings, but something deeper, a collective holding of breath, as everyone present sensed they were witnessing something potentially extraordinary. Seasoned attorneys who argued cases for a living found themselves speechless. Court personnel who had seen thousands of hearings recognized that this moment was unlike anything in their experience. Rex paused several feet from Maya, his intelligent brown eyes studying the small girl with the patience that had made him legendary. He didn't rush forward or demand attention. Instead, he simply existed in her space, radiating the calm strength that was his trademark. His massive frame seemed to create an invisible bubble of protection around Maya's chair, and for the first time since entering the courtroom that morning, the tension began to ebb slightly. Maya, who had sat motionless for hours, slowly turned her head toward Rex. The movement was subtle, barely perceptible to most observers, but Dr. Foster caught it immediately, her heart beginning to race with anticipation. After 6 months of complete withdrawal, Maya was acknowledging another living being. The purple elephant in Maya's arms shifted slightly as her grip loosened, just enough to suggest that her attention was being drawn elsewhere. Her hollow eyes, which had stared at nothing for so long, began to focus on the magnificent animal who had somehow managed to penetrate the walls she had built around herself. Rex waited patiently, his training telling him that this moment required perfect stillness, perfect calm. He was exactly where he needed to be, doing exactly what he was born to do. Rex settled beside Maya's chair with the fluid grace of a natural protector, his massive frame creating an invisible sanctuary around the traumatized child. His positioning was deliberate and precise, close enough to offer comfort, but not so near as to feel threatening. Years of specialized training had taught him to read the subtle signals of fear and withdrawal, and every instinct told him that Maya needed space to make her own choice about trust. The courtroom had never been quieter. Even the ancient heating system seemed to pause its mechanical breathing, as if the building itself understood the gravity of this moment. Attorney Maxwell, who moments before had been pontificating about financial advantages, found his briefcase forgotten at his feet. His opposing counsel, a seasoned family law attorney named Jennifer Walsh, sat frozen with her pen suspended over her legal pad, instinctively knowing that whatever happened next would render all their carefully prepared arguments meaningless. Maya's dark eyes, which had stared into nothingness for 6 months, slowly began to track Rex's movements. It was the first sign of genuine awareness anyone had witnessed since that horrible October night. Dr. Foster, positioned where she could, observed Maya's micro-expressions, felt her pulse quicken as she documented what she was seeing. The child's rigid posture remained unchanged, but something fundamental was shifting behind those haunted eyes, a flicker of recognition that someone was there, truly there, in her world of silence. Sarah Chun Martinez pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks as she watched her niece show the first sign of engagement in months. She remembered how Maya used to love animals, how she would squeal with delight at the neighbor's cat or beg to pet every dog they encountered on their walks. That joyful child seemed lost forever, buried beneath layers of trauma and fear. But now, watching Maya's eyes focus on Rex with something approaching curiosity, Sarah dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, her beloved niece was still in there somewhere. Rex's breathing was deep and steady, creating a rhythm that seemed to synchronize with the heartbeats of everyone present. His brown eyes never left Maya's face, but his gaze wasn't invasive or demanding. Instead, it was patient and accepting, conveying a message that needed no words. I'm here. I'm safe. I understand pain. Judge Harrison found herself leaning forward in her chair, her judicial composure momentarily forgotten. She had presided over thousands of cases, witnessed countless human dramas unfold in her courtroom, but nothing had prepared her for this moment of suspended possibility. The weight of her decision to allow Rex into the proceedings suddenly felt enormous. If this didn't work, if Maya retreated even further into herself, Harrison would carry that responsibility forever. Minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness. Rex remained perfectly still, demonstrating the extraordinary patience that had made him legendary among therapy animals. His handler, Officer Morrison, watched from across the room, his own breathing shallow with anticipation. He had seen Rex work miracles before, but Maya's silence ran deeper than anything they had previously encountered. The dog's success rate was unprecedented, but every case was unique, every broken child a new challenge. Then something shifted in the atmosphere. Maya's grip on her purple elephant loosened almost imperceptibly. The threadbare toy, which had been clutched like a lifeline for months, slipped slightly in her small hands. Her gaze, which had been darting between Rex's face and the floor, began to linger longer on the magnificent animal beside her chair. The court stenographer, Helen Martinez, had been documenting legal proceedings for 15 years. She had trained herself to maintain focus on her keyboard, regardless of the drama unfolding around her. But now, her fingers hovered motionless over the keys as she watched Maya begin to lean just slightly, almost imperceptibly toward Rex. Dr. Foster's professional training told her to remain objective, to document rather than hope, but she couldn't stop her heart from racing as she observed Maya's micro-movements. The child's breathing had changed, becoming less shallow and mechanical. Her shoulders, rigid with months of tension, seemed to soften by degrees. Most remarkably, the vacant stare that had characterized her condition was being replaced by something that looked almost like ... interest. Rex sensed the change immediately. His ears twitched almost imperceptibly, and his tail gave the slightest movement, not enough to startle, but sufficient to show that he was aware of Maya's growing attention. His training had taught him to respond to the subtlest cues, to calibrate his reactions to match the comfort level of each individual child. The purple elephant slipped further in Maya's grasp, one small hand loosening its death grip on the familiar comfort object. Slowly, tentatively, with the caution of someone who had learned that the world could shatter without warning, Maya began to extend that newly freed hand toward Rex. The courtroom held its collective breath. Bailiffs who had maintained stern expressions through murder trials found themselves blinking back unexpected emotion. Even Richard and Patricia Chun, Maya's wealthy grandparents, who had seemed unmoved by their granddaughter's condition, leaned forward with obvious concern and hope. Maya's tiny fingers trembled in the air between her chair and Rex's golden coat. The distance was perhaps 18 inches, but it might as well have been a chasm spanning continents. This was the first voluntary movement she had made in months, the first sign that she might be willing to connect with the world beyond her trauma. Rex waited with the patience of a saint, his body perfectly still except for the gentle rise and fall of his breathing. He could sense Maya's internal struggle, her desperate need for connection, warring with her learned fear of vulnerability. His training told him that this moment would determine everything, whether Maya took this first tentative step back toward trust, or retreated even further into her protective silence. Time seemed suspended as Maya's hand moved those final few inches, her fingertips barely grazing the soft fur on Rex's shoulder. The contact lasted only seconds, but the impact reverberated through every person in the courtroom. And then, in a voice so soft it was barely audible, so fragile it seemed it might shatter the very air around it, Maya spoke. "Good boy." The words hung in the silence like a prayer answered, a miracle witnessed, a child's voice reclaimed from the darkness that had held it captive for 6 long months. The 2 words "good boy" seemed to echo in the courtroom long after Maya's whisper had faded, creating ripples of shock that spread through the assembled crowd like stones thrown into still water. For a moment that stretched into eternity, nobody moved, nobody breathed. The simple phrase had shattered 6 months of impenetrable silence with the force of a thunderclap, leaving everyone struggling to process what they had just witnessed. Judge Harrison was the first to react, her judicial composure cracking like ice under pressure. Her hands trembled as she removed her glasses, revealing eyes bright with unshed tears. In 20 years of presiding over family court, she had witnessed countless moments of human drama custody battles won and lost, families torn apart and rebuilt, children caught in the crossfire of adult conflicts. But nothing had prepared her for this moment of pure miracle unfolding in her courtroom. "Dear God," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the sudden commotion that erupted around them. Dr. Foster lunged from her seat with the urgency of someone witnessing a medical breakthrough. Her professional notebook scattered to the floor as she fumbled for her phone to document the exact time. 3:47 p.m., when Maya Chan had spoken her first words in 6 months. Her hands shook so violently she could barely hold the device steady. This wasn't just progress. This was the kind of breakthrough that would be studied in child psychology journals for decades to come. "This is unprecedented," she gasped, too. No one in particular, her usual professional vocabulary failing her in the face of what she had just witnessed. 6 months of complete selective mutism, and she breaks through with a therapy dog. The implications are, this changes everything we know about trauma recovery in children. Sarah Shun Martinez collapsed forward in her chair as if the tension that had been holding her upright for months suddenly gave way. 6 months of sleepless nights, of trying to coax responses from her silent niece, of wondering if the bright, chattering child she had loved was lost forever. All of that weight came crashing down in a wave of overwhelming relief. Her sobs echoed through the courtroom, raw and primal, the sound of a heart that had carried too much pain for too long, finally allowing itself to hope. "Maya," she whispered through her tears, "my sweet Maya, you spoke. You actually spoke." The court stenographer, Helen Martinez, sat frozen at her machine, her fingers hovering over keys that suddenly seemed inadequate to capture the magnitude of what had just occurred. In 15 years of documenting legal proceedings, she had transcribed everything from minor traffic violations to capital murder cases. But how do you put a miracle into the legal record? How do you document the moment when hope returns to a broken child? Bailiff Robert Thompson, a 30-year veteran of courthouse security who prided himself on maintaining order in even the most chaotic situations, found himself wiping away tears he couldn't control. He had seen hardened criminals break down, witnessed families destroyed by addiction and violence. But Maya's whispered words had affected him more profoundly than anything in his career. The tough exterior he had cultivated through decades of law enforcement crumbled in the face of a 3-year-old's tentative return to the world. "Jesus Christ," he muttered under his breath, immediately apologizing to the judge for his language. But Judge Harrison was too overwhelmed to notice the breach of courtroom protocol. Attorney Maxwell, who moments before had been arguing the superiority of his client's financial resources, stood speechless beside his expensive briefcase. His carefully prepared talking points about trust funds and private schools seemed suddenly trivial in the face of Maya's breakthrough. He found himself looking at Richard and Patricia Chun, Maya's grandparents, whose own faces reflected a mixture of shock and something that might have been the beginning of understanding. Patricia Chun, who had maintained a cold, disapproving expression throughout the hearing, pressed her hand to her throat as her eyes filled with tears. For the first time, she seemed to truly see her granddaughter not as a prize to be won in a legal battle, but as a traumatized child who needed healing. More than money. Her husband Richard, equally stunned, reached for her hand with shaking fingers. Across the courtroom, news of the breakthrough was already spreading beyond the confines of courtroom 4B. Court clerks who had been typing routine paperwork stopped their work to peek through doorways. Other judges, in the middle of their own proceedings, received whispered updates from bailiffs and found themselves making excuses to step out and witness the aftermath of what was already being called the miracle in courtroom 4. Officer Morrison felt his chest tighten with a mixture of pride and awe as he watched Rex maintain his perfect composure beside Maya's chair. The dog seemed to understand the significance of what had just occurred, his tail wagging slowly as Maya's hand remained buried in his golden fur. Rex had worked many cases, helped dozens of traumatized children find their voices, but Morrison could sense that this moment was special, even by Rex's extraordinary standards. Maya herself seemed almost surprised by the sound of her own voice. Her dark eyes, which had been vacant for so long, now showed flickers of awareness and confusion. She looked from Rex to her Aunt Sarah, then back to Rex, as if trying to understand. why her whispered words had caused such commotion. The purple elephant remained forgotten in her lap as both her small hands now rested on Rex's fur, stroking it with the tentative wonder of someone rediscovering the world through touch. Dr. Foster managed to steady her phone long enough to begin recording notes, her professional training kicking in despite her emotional response. Subject spoke spontaneously after minimal contact with therapy animal, she dictated rapidly. First verbal communication in 183 days. Response triggered by tactile contact with certified therapy dog. Immediate environmental factors. Quiet courtroom, minimal sensory stimulation, presence of familiar caregiver. But even as she attempted to document the clinical aspects of Maya's breakthrough, Dr. Foster couldn't shake the feeling that they had witnessed something that transcended medical explanation. Sometimes, she realized, healing came not through textbook protocols or therapeutic techniques, but through the simple, powerful connection between a broken child and an animal who understood pain without needing words to explain it. The courtroom gradually began to settle into a new kind of quiet, not the tense silence that had preceded Maya's words, but a reverent hush that acknowledged the sacred nature of what had just occurred. Maya had spoken, and in doing so, she had changed everything. Detective Lisa Rodriguez was reviewing cold case files in her cramped office at the 14th District when her phone erupted with the urgency that only comes with breaking cases. The caller ID showed Cook County Court, and her stomach immediately clenched. After 6 months of dead ends and sleepless nights, the Chun case had become her white whale, the one that haunted her dreams and followed her home every evening. Rodriguez here, she answered, already reaching for her jacket. Detective, this is Judge Harrison. You need to get down here immediately. The Chung girl Maya, she spoke. She actually spoke. Rodriguez felt the world tilt on its axis. She had interviewed Maya 3 times in the months following her mother's murder, each attempt ending in frustration as the child sat silent and unresponsive. The case had grown cold despite Rodriguez's relentless pursuit of leads. Without Maya's testimony, they had circumstantial evidence at best, certainly nothing that would hold up in court against a defense attorney worth his salt. I'm on my way, Rodriguez said, already sprinting toward the parking garage. Don't let anyone else talk to her until I get there. The 15-minute drive to the courthouse felt like hours. Rodriguez's mind raced through the evidence they had collected, the forced entry, the signs of struggle, the DNA samples that had yielded no matches in the system. Maya was their only witness to Diane Chun's brutal murder, the only person who had seen the killer's face. If she could speak now, if she could remember details that adult witnesses had missed. Rodriguez burst through the courthouse doors with the determination of someone chasing justice long delayed. Word of Maya's breakthrough had spread through the building like wildfire, and she found clusters of court personnel whispering excitedly in the hallways. But as she approached Courtroom 4B, Rodriguez forced herself to slow down, to remember that she was dealing with a traumatized 3-year-old, not a hardened witness. Judge Harrison had arranged for a private conference room adjacent to the courtroom. Away from the chaos and crowd, Dr. Foster met Rodriguez at the door, her eyes bright with a mixture of professional excitement and protective concern for her patient. She's been speaking intermittently since the initial breakthrough, Dr. Foster explained in hushed tones. Short phrases, mostly directed at the therapy dog. But she's aware, Lisa. For the first time in months, she's truly present and aware. Rodriguez peered through the conference room's small window and felt her heart constrict. Nia sat in a child-sized chair that had been brought from the court's family services department, her small hands still buried in Rex's golden fur. The transformation was remarkable. Where once there had been a hollow-eyed shell of a child, now sat a little girl who was looking around the room with genuine curiosity. May I? Rodriguez asked Dr. Foster, who nodded but held up a cautionary hand. Go slowly. Let her set the pace. And keep Rex close. He's become her anchor to communication. Rodriguez entered the room with the careful movements of someone approaching. A frightened animal. She had interviewed hundreds of witnesses over her 12-year career, but this felt different. This wasn't just about solving a case. It was about helping a broken child reclaim her voice and hopefully find justice for her mother. Hi, Maya, Rodriguez said softly, settling into a chair across from the little girl. Do you remember me? I'm Detective Rodriguez. I'm a police officer, like Officer Morrison, who brought Rex to see you. Maya's dark eyes studied Rodriguez's face with an intensity that was both encouraging and heartbreaking. For long moments, she said nothing, her fingers continuing their rhythmic stroking of Rex's fur. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she spoke. You have a badge like Mommy shows. Rodriguez felt her pulse quicken. Maya was remembering television shows, making connections. Her cognitive functions were intact, despite the trauma. That's right, Maya. I'm here to help find the bad person who hurt your mommy. Can you help me do that? The room fell silent except for Rex's steady breathing and the distant sounds of courthouse activity. Dr. Foster held her breath, knowing that the next few minutes could determine whether Maya was ready to unlock the memories she had, buried deep in her traumatized mind. Maya looked down at Rex, then back at Rodriguez. The bad man scared Mommy, she whispered, her voice gaining slight strength. He was loud and mean. Rodriguez's training kicked in. She needed details, but she couldn't push too hard or risk, sending Maya back into silence. Can you tell me what the bad man looked like, Maya? Did you see his face? Maya's grip on Rex's fur tightened, and for a moment Rodriguez feared she had pushed too far. But then Maya leaned closer to Rex, drawing strength from his calm presence. He had pictures on his neck, Maya said, her small voice carrying the weight of memories too terrible for someone so young. Like a scary bug, a spider with long legs. Rodriguez felt electricity shoot through her body. A spider tattoo on the neck that was specific, unique, the kind of detail that could break a case wide open. She forced herself to remain calm, to not show the excitement that was threatening to overwhelm her professional composure. That's very helpful, Maya. You're being so brave. Was there anything else about the bad man? Did he say anything? Maya was quiet for several minutes, her small face scrunched in concentration as she searched through memories that had been locked away by trauma. Rex seemed to sense her struggle, nuzzling closer to provide additional comfort. He called Mommy. A bad name, Maya finally whispered. And he smelled like cigarettes and then something else, something yucky. Rodriguez made careful notes, knowing that every detail could be crucial. Cigarettes and another odor perhaps, alcohol, drugs, or industrial chemicals that could help narrow down the suspect's lifestyle or occupation. You're doing such a good job, Maya, Rodriguez said gently. Is there anything else you remember about that night? Anything at all? Maya looked thoughtful, her young mind working to process traumatic memories that had been suppressed for months. He dropped something when he ran away, something shiny that made a noise on the floor. Rodriguez leaned forward slightly, careful, not to appear threatening. What kind of shiny thing, Maya? Can you tell me more about it? Like Daddy's keys, Maya said, then immediately looked confused. But Daddy doesn't live with us anymore. Rodriguez exchanged glances with Dr. Foster. Maya was referring to her estranged father, who had an ironclad alibi for the night of the murder. But the detail about keys or something metallic being dropped could be crucial physical evidence that hadn't been recovered from the crime scene. As Maya continued to share fragments of that terrible night, Rodriguez felt the familiar thrill of a case beginning to crack open. The spider tattoo alone would be enough to run through their database of known criminals. Combined with the physical description and behavioral details Maya was providing, they finally had a real lead in Diane Chun's murder. But more than that, watching Maya find her voice again in the presence of Rex, Rodriguez witnessed something that transcended police work. She was watching a child heal, one word at a time, one memory at a time, with the help of an extraordinary dog who somehow understood that justice and healing could walk hand in hand. By 6 p.m., the Cook County Courthouse resembled a war zone of satellite trucks, news vans, and reporters clutching microphones like weapons. Word of Maya's miraculous breakthrough had leaked from the courthouse with the speed of digital wildfire, transforming a quiet Tuesday custody hearing into the biggest human interest story Chicago had seen in years. Channel 7's evening anchor, Maria Santos, stood on the courthouse steps adjusting her blazer against the October chill as she prepared for what would become the most watched news segment of her career. Behind her, a growing crowd of onlookers, pressed against police barriers, their faces illuminated by the harsh glare of television lights. This is Maria Santos reporting from Cook County Courthouse, where earlier today, 3-year-old Maya Chun spoke her first words in 6 months after a specially trained therapy dog entered her custody hearing. Santos announced, her professional composure barely containing her excitement. The story of Maya's silence following her mother's brutal murder and her breakthrough with Rex, the therapy dog, has captured the hearts of viewers across the nation. Inside the courthouse, Officer Morrison had created a protective barrier around Maya and Rex, understanding that his 4-legged partner was about to become the most famous dog in America. Courthouse security worked overtime to prevent unauthorized personnel from accessing the family court wing, but the pressure from media requests was becoming overwhelming. Channel 2 wants an exclusive interview with Rex, Morrison's supervisor, Captain Williams, informed him during a hastily arranged briefing. Fox News is offering to fly in from New York. CNN wants to do a live remote from the courthouse steps. Morrison shook his head firmly. Rex isn't a circus act, Captain. He's a working therapy animal, and right now his only concern is Maya Chun's well-being. No interviews, no photo ops, no media circus until that little girl is safe and stable. But the story was already beyond their control. Social media had erupted with hashtag Maya Speaks trending globally within 3 hours of her breakthrough. The courthouse's official Twitter account, typically reserved for scheduling announcements, was flooded with thousands of messages from around the world. Parents of autistic children shared their own therapy dog success stories. Trauma survivors posted about their healing journeys. Dog rescue organizations reported unprecedented spikes in volunteer applications. Dr. Foster found herself fielding calls from colleagues across the country, each wanting to understand the specifics of Maya's breakthrough. The American Psychological Association requested permission to document the case for their journal. Universities from Harvard to UCLA inquired about studying Rex's methods. Publishers offered book deals before she'd even finished her preliminary notes. This could revolutionize how we approach childhood trauma recovery, Dr. Foster explained to a packed conference room of hospital administrators who had gathered for an emergency meeting about the media attention. Maya's case provides concrete evidence that therapy animals can achieve breakthroughs where traditional methods fail. We need to be prepared for the research requests, the funding opportunities, and yes, the media scrutiny that's coming our way. The story reached far beyond Chicago's city limits. In rural Montana, a veterinarian named Dr. Sarah Mitchell watched the evening news and immediately called her local police department, volunteering to begin training therapy dogs for their child victim unit. In Miami, retired police officer Carlos Hernandez started researching certification programs, inspired to dedicate his retirement to training courthouse therapy animals. Maya's story resonated particularly strongly with law enforcement communities. Police departments from Seattle to Atlanta began inquiring about therapy dog programs. The International Association of Police Chiefs issued a statement supporting expanded use of therapy animals in criminal justice proceedings. Funding applications for canine therapy units increased by 400% within 48 hours of the story breaking. But it was the personal responses that truly demonstrated the story's impact. In Portland, Oregon, 6-year-old Emma Williams, who hadn't spoken since witnessing a car accident, asked her parents if she could meet a dog like Rex. Her mother, Jennifer Williams, drove 8 hours to Portland's Children's Hospital after seeing Maya's story, hoping to find similar help for her daughter. When I saw that little girl speak for the first time in months, I knew we had to try everything. Jennifer told the hospital's therapy dog coordinator, "If a dog helped Maya find her voice, maybe one can help Emma too." Rex himself seemed largely oblivious to his newfound celebrity status. He remained focused on Maya, who had gradually begun speaking more frequently throughout the afternoon. Their bond had deepened with each passing hour, and courthouse staff marveled at the dog's intuitive understanding of exactly when to approach and when to give the child space. Sarah Chun Martinez found herself overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. Her modest apartment's phone rang constantly with calls from well-wishers, job offers from school districts around the country, and interview requests from major television networks. The Chicago Teachers Union announced they were establishing a scholarship fund in Maya's name to support trauma recovery programs in schools. "I never expected this," Sarah told Judge Harrison during a private conference. "People are sending cards, toys for Maya, donations for therapy dog programs. There are reporters camped outside our apartment building. I don't know how to handle this kind of attention." Local businesses quickly mobilized to support Maya's family and the therapy dog program. Chuck's Pet Store donated a lifetime supply of food and toys for Rex. The Chicago Cubs offered Maya and Sarah season tickets. A local law firm established a pro bono legal fund for families dealing with similar trauma-related custody issues. The story's reach extended internationally when BBC picked up the coverage, leading to interviews with therapy dog programs in the UK and Australia. Maya's breakthrough became a symbol of hope for trauma survivors worldwide, proof that healing could emerge from the most unexpected sources. Rex's training organization, the Midwest Canine Therapy Institute, reported being completely overwhelmed with inquiries. Their director, Dr. Patricia Stone, worked 18-hour days fielding calls from hospitals, courts, and schools wanting to establish similar programs. "We've been advocating for expanded therapy dog programs for years," Dr. Stone explained in a hastily arranged press conference. "Maya's case has given us the public platform we needed to demonstrate these animals' incredible capabilities. We're already working with facilities in 12 states to establish new programs." As evening fell over Chicago, Maya sat in her aunt's apartment, unaware that her two simple words had sparked a national conversation about trauma, healing, and the extraordinary bond between humans and animals. Rex lay beside her on the couch, his steady presence providing the security she needed to continue her remarkable journey back to the world of words and trust. Outside, the media circus continued, but inside that small apartment, the real miracle was just beginning. A little girl rediscovering her voice, one word at a time. Detective Rodriguez's hands shook as she stared at the computer screen displaying Marcus Kane's mugshot. The spider tattoo stretching across his neck was unmistakable, exactly as Maya had described it, down to the elongated legs that seemed to crawl across his throat like a living nightmare. After inputting Maya's description into the criminal database, the search had returned 17 possible matches. But Kane's photograph had made Rodriguez's blood run cold with recognition. Marcus Kane, 34, had a rap sheet that read, "Like a catalog of escalating violence, breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon, armed robbery, and 2 previous charges of home invasion that had been plea bargained down to lesser offenses. He was exactly the kind of predator who would target a single mother living alone with a small child, exactly the kind of coward who would flee when confronted with unexpected resistance. "We've got him," Rodriguez whispered to her partner, Detective James Murphy, who was coordinating with the forensics team to re-examine evidence from the Chun crime scene. "Marcus Kane, last known address on the south side. Maya's description matches perfectly. The arrest came at dawn on Thursday morning, exactly 48 hours after Maya's breakthrough in the courthouse. Kane was pulled over for a routine traffic stop 3 blocks from his apartment, unaware that every police officer in Chicago was looking for a man with a distinctive spider tattoo. When Officer Patricia Gomez approached his vehicle and saw the unmistakable marking on his neck, she called for backup with barely contained excitement. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I've got a code red suspect in custody. Request immediate backup. Can Detective Rodriguez on scene." Kane's arrogance crumbled the moment he realized why he was being arrested. The cocky smirk that had carried him through decades of criminal activity vanished when Rodriguez showed him Maya's photograph and repeated the little girl's description of his tattoo. For 6 months, he had believed he was safe, convinced that a traumatized 3-year-old would never be able to testify against him. "That kid was supposed to be a vegetable," Kane muttered during his interrogation, his words recorded for posterity. "I heard she went mute or something. Couldn't talk." "She found her voice," Rodriguez replied coldly, sliding additional evidence across the interrogation table. "And she remembered everything, Marcus. The spider tattoo, the cigarettes, even the keys you dropped when you ran." Kane's face went ashen. The keys, his apartment keys, had indeed been found at the crime scene, but without a suspect to match them to. They had been filed as inconclusive evidence. Now, with Kane in custody, the keys became another link in the chain of evidence that would ensure his conviction. The DNA evidence that had stymied investigators for months suddenly made perfect sense. Kane's saliva on a cigarette butt found outside Diane Chun's apartment, fingerprints on a window that had been forced open, and traces of his blood on broken glass from the struggle, all combined to create an overwhelming case for the prosecution. District Attorney Michelle Roberts held a press conference announcing Kane's arrest, with Maya's breakthrough serving as the centerpiece of her presentation. Standing before a room packed with journalists from around the world, Roberts delivered a statement that would be quoted in legal textbooks for years to come. 3-year-old Maya Chun's courage in finding her voice has not only begun her own healing journey, but has also ensured that her mother's killer will face justice. This case demonstrates the crucial importance of therapy dog programs in helping traumatized witnesses testify in criminal proceedings. The trial, held 3 months later, became a landmark case in the use of therapy animals in legal proceedings. Maya's testimony, delivered via closed-circuit television with Rex by her side, was the prosecution's most powerful evidence. Her small voice, barely audible through the courtroom speakers, carried the weight of absolute truth as she described the night her world shattered. "The bad man with the spider hurt my mommy," Maya told the jury, her tiny hand never leaving Rex's golden fur. "He was loud and scary, and he made mommy cry." Defense attorney Robert Sullivan, a veteran criminal lawyer with a reputation for aggressive cross-examination, found himself unable to challenge a 3-year-old's testimony delivered with such innocent clarity. The jury, composed of parents and grandparents who could barely look at Maya without tears in their eyes, deliberated for only 2 hours before returning with their verdict. Guilty of murder in the first degree. Judge Catherine Walsh, presiding over her first high-profile murder case, delivered a sentence that reflected both the severity of Kane's crime and the impact of Maya's courage. Life without the possibility of parole. "Mr. Kane," Judge Walsh said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute justice, You not only took the life of Diane Chun, but you attempted to silence the only witness to your crime, a 3-year-old child who depended on you to show mercy. Instead, you left her traumatized and voiceless. Today, that same child's courage ensures that you will never harm another family. The custody hearing that had started Maya's journey to justice concluded with equal decisiveness. Judge Harrison, moved by Maya's remarkable recovery and Sarah's unwavering dedication, awarded permanent guardianship to Maya's aunt. The wealthy grandparents, Richard and Patricia Chun, surprised everyone by supporting the decision after witnessing their granddaughter's transformation. Sarah gave Maya what money never could. Patricia Chun admitted in a rare moment of vulnerability. She gave her love, patience, and the chance to heal. We want to be part of Maya's life, but we understand that Sarah is her mother now in every way that matters. The legal resolution brought closure to a case that had captivated the nation, but more importantly, it provided Maya with the security she needed to continue her recovery. Rex remained a constant presence in her life, visiting weekly as part of her ongoing therapy program. Officer Morrison watched from the gallery as Maya waved goodbye to the courtroom that had witnessed her miracle. She was speaking in full sentences. Now, asking questions, expressing preferences, and slowly rebuilding the personality that trauma had stolen from her. "Ready to go home, Maya?" Sarah asked, taking her niece's small hand as they prepared to leave the courthouse for the final time. Maya looked back at Rex, who wagged his tail in encouragement, then up at her aunt with eyes that now sparkled with life and trust. "Yes, Auntie Sarah, let's go home." Justice had been served, but more than that, a little girl had found her way back to the world, one word at a time, with the help of an extraordinary dog who understood that sometimes the most important victories are won not in courtrooms, but in the quiet moments when broken hearts learn to trust again. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Lincoln Elementary School as 5-year-old Maya Chun skipped down the hallway, her new backpack shaped like a golden retriever bouncing with each step. Her dark hair was pulled back in pigtails, adorned with small dog-bone clips, and her bright smile could have powered the entire building. The transformation from the silent, traumatized child who had sat motionless in a courtroom 18 months earlier was nothing short of miraculous. "Mrs. Peterson, Mrs. Peterson." Maya called excitedly to her kindergarten teacher, racing toward the classroom with the boundless energy that defined healthy 5-year-olds everywhere. "Rex is coming to visit today. He's going to meet all my friends and show them his special tricks." Teacher Jennifer Peterson, a 20-year veteran educator who had worked with countless children, still marveled at Maya's remarkable recovery. She had reviewed Maya's file before the school year began, preparing herself to work with a child who might struggle with communication and trust. Instead, she found herself with one of the most articulate, empathetic, and resilient students she had ever encountered. "That's wonderful, Maya," Mrs. Peterson replied, kneeling to Maya's level. "Have you prepared the presentation you wanted to give about therapy dogs?" Maya nodded enthusiastically, pulling a carefully decorated poster from her backpack. The artwork, created with the determined focus that characterized everything Maya did, showed a golden dog surrounded by hearts and the words, "Rex helps kids feel better," written in her careful 5-year-old handwriting. The weekly visits from Rex had become legendary at Lincoln Elementary. What had started as part of Maya's individualized therapy program had evolved into an educational outreach that benefited the entire school community. Principal Robert Martinez had initially been hesitant about allowing a large dog into the building, but Maya's passionate advocacy and the overwhelming research supporting therapy animal programs had convinced him to approve the visits. Morrison arrived promptly at 10 a.m., as he had every Tuesday for the past year. Rex, now wearing a special school visitor bandana alongside his official therapy dog vest, carried himself with the dignified bearing of someone who understood his importance. The hallway erupted in excited whispers as students caught glimpses of the famous dog who had helped their classmate find her voice. "Class, our special visitor is here," Mrs. Peterson announced, and 24 kindergartners immediately arranged themselves in a perfect circle on the colorful classroom carpet. Maya positioned herself directly beside Rex, one small hand automatically finding its place in his. Golden fur, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "Today I'm going to tell you about my very best friend Rex," Maya began, her clear voice carrying the confidence that came from months of practice. "Rex is a therapy dog, which means he has a very important job helping kids who feel scared or sad. When I couldn't talk for a really long time, Rex helped me find my words again." The children listened with the rapt attention that only kindergartners can muster, their eyes wide as Maya explained how Rex was trained to understand feelings, how he knew exactly when to come close and when to give space, and how his calm presence could make even the scariest situations feel safer. "Can Rex do tricks?" asked Tommy Williams, a shy boy who rarely spoke in class but seemed mesmerized by the magnificent dog. Maya's face lit up. "He can, but his best trick isn't rolling over or shaking hands. His best trick is helping people feel brave." As if on cue, Rex moved toward Tommy, who had mentioned to his mother that he sometimes felt scared at school. The dog settled beside the nervous boy with the precision that had made him famous, offering the same calm presence that had transformed Maya's life. Tommy's face broke into a smile as his small hand touched Rex's fur, and Mrs. Peterson made a mental note to discuss Tommy's anxiety with the school counselor. After school, Maya and Sarah walked hand in hand to their favorite coffee shop, routine that had replaced the painful therapy appointments that had once dominated their schedule. Sarah, now working as a curriculum specialist for the Chicago Public Schools, a position she had earned partly due to the recognition from Maya's case, watched her niece chatter excitedly about her day. "And Sarah, Tommy asked if Rex could visit his house sometime because he gets scared during thunderstorms. Can we help him?" Maya asked, her natural empathy shining through every word. "We can definitely talk to Officer Morrison about that," Sarah replied, her heart swelling with pride at Maya's concern for others. This was the child who had been locked in silence for 6 months, now advocating for other children who needed help. Their apartment walls were covered with evidence of Maya's remarkable journey. Thank you cards from families around the country who had been inspired to seek therapy dog assistance. Photos from the children's book signing for Rex and the Magic Words, which had become a bestseller with all proceeds donated to therapy dog programs. A framed newspaper article about Maya's testimony that had helped change legislation regarding therapy animals in courtrooms. But Maya's favorite decoration was a simple photograph taken on that pivotal day in the courthouse, the exact moment her hand first touched Rex's fur, captured by a court photographer who understood he was witnessing history. The image had become iconic, used in textbooks and training materials for therapy dog programs worldwide. Dr. Foster, now the director of the Children's Trauma Recovery Center at Chicago Children's Hospital, often used Maya's case in her lectures to medical students and psychology residents. Maya had become more than a patient. She had become a symbol of resilience and the healing power of the human-animal bond. Maya's recovery wasn't just about finding her voice. Dr. Foster explained to a packed auditorium at Northwestern University. It was about rediscovering trust, rebuilding her sense of safety in the world, and learning that healing can come from unexpected sources. Rex didn't just help Maya speak. He helped her remember how to hope. The ripple effects of Maya's breakthrough continued to spread. The therapy dog program at Cook County Courthouse had expanded to serve all family courts in Illinois. Officer Morrison had been promoted to head the state's first comprehensive courthouse therapy animal program. Rex had been honored by the American Kennel Club as Therapy Dog of the Year and had his paw prints permanently installed in the courthouse lobby. But perhaps the most remarkable testament to Maya's transformation was her nightly routine. Every evening before bed, as she had for the past 18 months, Maya would hold her old purple elephant, now carefully repaired with new button eyes and a properly sewn ear, and whisper her gratitude to the dog who had changed her life. "Thank you, Rex, for helping me find my words," she would say, her voice clear and strong. "Thank you for showing me it's okay to trust again. Good boy, Rex. You'll always be my good boy." As Maya drifted off to sleep, surrounded by the security of Sarah's love and the knowledge that Rex was just a phone call away if she ever needed him, her dreams were filled not with nightmares from the past, but with endless possibilities for the future. She wanted to become a veterinarian, she had decided, so she could help other animals become heroes like Rex. In the darkness of her bedroom, Maya-chan smiled in her sleep, a little girl who had lost her voice to trauma, but found it again through love, courage, and the extraordinary bond between a broken child and a dog who understood that sometimes the most powerful words are the simplest ones. Good boy. The miracle in Courtroom 4B had ended, but the story it began would continue forever. One rescued child, one therapy dog, and one moment of trust at a time.